All right, so here's something new too. I gotta like reset myself because we're back to intro to here. So every time you walk into Maya, like when you were in Cinema, you would just walk into Cinema and you would just open up the file and you would just start working on it. In Maya, we never want to double click a file and open it because what happens is it doesn't set up our properties or our project correctly. So we have to go to File and go to Set Project. Now here's another thing about Maya is that when it loads up, it loads about 10 or 15 different plugins right at the start. So your startup might be a little bit slow. So you can see my computer is actually going a bit slower than typically, but once it loads, it's pretty quick. So every day when you come into Maya, you open up the software and you go to File and you say Set Project. Then you can tell Maya what project you're working on. I'm working on the Sarcona Mech Anim, so I just click on that name and then I hit Set. Now Maya knows what project I'm working on, so that when it goes to grab textures, it pulls it from those folders. When I render stuff out, it puts it in those right folders. Okay? Someone already rendered something today, and then oopsie, it's rendering to a totally different spot, and then they have to go and hunt those files down. All right, so there's my file. All right, so now I can go to File Open and find my file. Okay, so here's where we left off last time. Make sure you're playing through your animation and everything is looking the way you want it to look. It's not too late, but obviously you don't want to go through the process of rendering this out only to find you've made a mistake. Like these things on someone's that they rendered today was out of order. They did this animation after these things came out. They did that animation and then it looked funky. Okay, so you just want to be aware of that. I'm just going to look at my scene real quick. It looks like, oh, they're just dark. That's why I can't see them. Okay. So now to render our stuff out, we go to this area here. So you see that on the top, this was the render button we were clicking before. Two over from that is the gear render settings. So if we click on the gear render settings, this gives you the actual like render settings, like if you were inside Cinema, of how you would render your stuff out, what settings you would, where it would save. If you don't specify a file name, it'll just use your name. So Sarcona _ Mech Animation _ 001. You typically want to give this a name. That actually makes sense. Mech Animation. There we go. Okay. They've actually, it looks like they've updated some of their default settings. We want to make sure this is set to name.number.extension. When you go from Maya into After Effects or Cinema into After Effects or any program into After Effects with a sequence, what could happen is that sequence will not translate correctly unless this thing here is correctly chosen. You'll see it's the number 3 one down, name dot the # dot extension or name dot hashtag dot extension. Down here under frame range, we have to specify our frames. So everyone's is different. We looked at that last time that some people had like 200 frames. Some people had, I think 90 frames was I think the lowest. So we have, on mine at least, I have 120. That's how long mine is. So I'm going to go from frame 1 to frame 120. Scrolling down, I'm going to pick my camera. So I'm not going to use perspective because that camera doesn't move. I'm going to choose my render cam because that's the correct camera. For the image size, I'm going to refer to my little cheat sheet. So I'll look at my cheat sheet. I'll see what size it says on there. It says 960 by 540 for an animation. So that's 960 by 540. Okay? And that should be it. Okay, everything else inside here should be good. Yep, okay. So now we can just go to the rendering menu from here. So I just switched this to the rendering menu. And then I can go to render and say batch render. Okay. Now inside Cinema, when you would do a render, what would happen is the screen would show basically every frame. So a frame would get done and you'd see it. A frame would get done and you'd see it. Inside Maya, it doesn't do that. It saves resources by not doing that, okay? So in the background, this thing is rendering. Down here at the bottom, it says rendering with RenderMan /RIS, RIS. And now it's going. So you'll see here's the percentage done of frame number 1, okay? And I can verify where this is saving it to because it says RenderMan, Sarcona, Mechimation, whatever. So as it's rendering, I like to go into my folder and just double check and make sure everything is cool. So it said it's going into the RenderMan folder. It's going into 001_0. It's going into images. And then here are my images, okay? So then I could double click one of these and select the default program, which is DJV, right there. And what DJV does is it realizes this is a sequence and it plays it back in a sequence fashion. There it goes. So that's my animation so far. I have 3 frames, so it's just loading those 3 frames over and over again. Okay, and as I get more frames, obviously I'll be able to see those once they're all completed. Okay, so I need to go through and make sure that all of my animation is done on this, or all my rendering is done. It's a good idea though that throughout the rendering that you go and check it and make sure that everything is still looking good. It's very easy to neglect your rendering and just assume that it's working when in fact it probably isn't working fully, and you have to go through and kind of tweak some of your stuff. Okay, so obviously not as often as I'm doing it, but you want to wait till there's a good number of frames in here, double click it and check it out. Common things people do: render the wrong camera. Okay, so sometimes it's very easy to pick the wrong camera. You go to render it, you wait a day, you come back in and you have a still camera and it's like a mile away from your animation, which is super tiny. So just by doing this with a few frames, you can see from the background, I'm definitely moving. I'm definitely like going forward with this camera. So obviously this isn't a still camera. And then obviously lighting is another thing. If your lighting is too dark, that's an issue, so brighten it up. If your lighting is too bright, darken it down, okay? It's actually better to have maybe more lights around your scene that are softer or maybe like varying than to try to get everything in 1 light or 2 lights, okay? When they do Finding Nemo, in some of those underwater scenes, there were 200 lights that they created to create that underwater atmosphere, all right? Cool. So we're going to pretend that this is all done rendering. So I'm going to go into After Effects, and I'm going to show you then how we would take this animation, bring it into After Effects, and then make a movie. This process is not much different than the one you did in the intro class, but I just want to make sure you see it in case you've forgotten because we had Christmas and you drank a little bit too much. While this is going too, and we're waiting for After Effects, I'm going to right-click on my timeline or my taskbar down here and go to Start Task Manager. Under Processes, I can see how much resources this is using. So if I click on CPU, you'll see that the PR man, which is RenderMan, is using 98% or 90%, it fluctuates, percent of my computer. So that means that After Effects is going to open up extra slow because RenderMan is rendering. So anytime we render something, we want to basically set the priority below normal. So that, let's say, obviously there's no class right after this, but let's pretend that there is, okay? So if there's a class right after this, the students come in, they get on the computer, they try to open Photoshop, but it's going super slow. So what's the first thing they're going to do? Restart. They restart the computer, your rendering is dead, and now you come in and you're a super sad little puppy, okay? So you want to right-click on RenderMan, set your priority below normal. So what this does is it says you're opening up After Effects, so I'm going to lower the priority on RenderMan so that you can use After Effects. And you can see how it dropped drastically and then came back up. Okay, After Effects is going to use what it wants to use. We can even go in here if we're really want to make sure that nobody like shuts it off and it doesn't interfere with anything, we can say set affinity, and we can actually turn off the first 2 processors. And that means that after any other program will still have those first 2 processors available. What? How dare you? Apparently no. Alright, it won't let me do the first 1, but the other 2 I can do, so whatever. Alright, so now for sure it's not going to get any higher than about 83. That's like it's capping off at 83. Oh, never mind, it lied. Oh, it just took it over.
Are you sure you're not lying to us?
I am lying to you, apparently. Where is...
So I have a question.
Mm-hmm.
When we go to batch render, it says rendering threads. How many should it be?
The rendering threads, just so you can see this under the option box, this is how many processors this is using. So these computers have, let me see, make sure. I think it's 12. Oops, I don't know why I went there. Need to go here. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. Yes. They have 12 different processing units. So if you set this to 12, it should use 12 processors. There is, I guess, something with RenderMan, which I wasn't fully aware of here, that it is like resetting that every time. After Effects. The Maya batch to below normal, and I believe that should take care of it. I can even set the Maya batch affinity lower, and I think that should take care of the RenderMan issue. Because Maya batch is essentially what's controlling all of the rendering stuff that we're doing. Yep. I think that worked. Find out. Yeah, there we go. So we want to do that right click on Maya batch and set that below normal. And that way RenderMan will only use a certain amount. And you can see how much faster After Effects loaded once we click that button. Cool. And it actually loaded and didn't crash. So that actually was a good stall because now we got even more frames rendered. Okay. So in After Effects, I'm going to double click here. I'm going to find my files. So 2540, Sarcona Mech, RenderMan, 01. Images. I just click on the first image in this group and say import. And now I can drag this down to the new comp. Now before I do that, I want to check something. So on our cheat sheet we had 960 by 540. So definitely that came in 960 by 540. And then it's also reading our 30 frames per second. Okay? So if for some reason it read 24, which sometimes it does read 24 when it comes in, we want to right click. There we go. We want to right click on this and say interpret footage main, and then specify that this is definitely 30 frames per second. Now we can drag this onto the new comp button. And now our animation is inside of here. Okay? And then we can render this out. So we would just go to File, Export, Add to Render Queue. That's why I was thinking. Close that. File export, add to render queue. Lossless, you click right in the word. And then again, we can look at our cheat sheet and you can see that we're doing a QuickTime. And then under the format options, our format options should be which one? H.264, yes. Okay. Now if we had audio, we could click in the audio area and specify that. We don't have audio, so it's no big deal. You can just say audio off. That doesn't matter. Then we go to our not yet specified and give this a name and a location. So what should I be calling this? Name and then my project, right? So Mechimation or Mech Animation. Then we hit render, and away it goes. Now again, you want to check this at every state. So inside of After Effects, check your animation. When you render it out, check your animation. It's simple things like that that are amaze me that people do not check these things. I've had people turn in files where it's like, that's not even the assignment, that's not even the camera, that's not even what we were trying to turn in. Oh, I rendered the wrong thing, or oh, I didn't do this right. It's like, just check these things, it's much simpler. Okay, so once you're done with this, you're going to copy your folder. So here's my folder, I'm just going to make a copy of it in here. And because I'm rendering, of course, it's going to take a few minutes. I want to go through and wipe out all of the RenderMan stuff. So I don't need all those RenderMan images when you turn it in. I don't need any files that are not part of that. All I want is the actual folder with your movie and your final file, and then for future stuff, any textures you would have added to that group. Okay. So once this is done, there it goes. It's that grass. That grass takes forever. I should just delete it. There we go. So inside here, I don't need any of these things right there. None of those are important. The render data, the scene, this stuff, that's not important. Yep. The script, the slim, the sound, that's not important because none of those are in there. Inside my source images, I do have these textures. In this specific scene, I didn't use any of those textures, so this folder is actually not important, so I could just delete the stuff that's inside it. In the scene, I want to turn in just my final one. Alright, so I have one scene that's turned in. There's no source images assigned to this. And I have one movie. Okay? So that's the stuff that you're turning in. So then I can go back here and rename this. Instead of -copy, I'll just put -final. And I'm going to Control-C to copy it. I'm going to the Z drive, 2540, turn in, mech stickball, and then I'm pasting that in there. You jumped the gun, Carter. You can't make new folders on the Z drive either. Like, you have to make all your folders offline and then copy and paste it in, just because the Z drive doesn't allow you to edit stuff. It allows you to write to it but not edit anything. So if you were to create a folder and you tried to rename it, it would say nope. So you can't do that. I'm going to delete your thing from your Carter because that's wrong anyway. Okay, so that should be good. So I'm just going to wait until this is done, then I'll make my final movie, bunch it up, and then turn it in. Okay, so this should be turned in by the end of next week. That's when these should be planned on turned in. So if you figure today you're kind of like finishing up your lighting and your texturing and your animation, next class maybe you're rendering it out and then packaging it up, and then by the Wednesday of next week we're actually doing the next assignment. Okay? Good timeline? Cool? Alright.